So I know a lot of you, but for those I do not know, so I'm Angelica Diggs. I'm the executive director here at the Montclair History Center. I rejoined us actually just this past August, so I'm really excited to be back. I was a former employee for almost 7 years, so very familiar with the area and Montclair. I put some links in the chat. This is just ways to support us or to find our YouTube channel. All of our History at Home programs we do put up on YouTube, should you have missed part of it, and you can check that out there. A little housekeeping, if you are more than one person or more than 20 miles away, please put that in the chat for us. And if you hear a lot of noise of children in the background, we have a field trip on site today that's just exiting out towards their bus, so I apologize, but good sounds. So about today's program, which also will again be tonight at 7 p.m. So we're continuing our back to school theme, and we're thrilled to have Maciel Rodriguez Vars here to join us to discuss the recent history of the Montclair Public Schools and as it relates to the magnet school system. So we're going to be leading a viewing and discussion of the 2009 documentary, Our Schools, Our Town. And then we will, just to go into, Maciel also produced this as a parent and PTA council member when it became clear that many people in the district had grown up unaware of the origins and importance of the magnet school system. So Maciel is the executive director of the Montclair Fund for Education Excellence. The documentary project was completed, as we noted early in her career, actively involved with the public school system. So I am going to turn over to Maciel just to say a few things, and then we're going to go right into the screening through YouTube, which we will screen share for everyone on the screen. So thank you. Welcome, Maciel.
Thank you so much, Angelica, and everyone. I'm so excited to be here. It's been a long time. I forgot how long it has been since we put together this film, and there's so many other chapters to be told, which is why I think the History Center is such a vital resource in town, really to remind us of our history, but also to help us think about like how do we continue to tell kind of the new stories that build on our past. So I'm very thrilled to be here. Thank you all, and look forward to chatting after.
Okay, so give us one moment. We're going to screen share and get YouTube up to play.
And then Angelica, just make sure that we're okay with sound.
Yep.
There's a little.
Montclair is a town with great diversity, with artists and bankers, with families who have lived here for generations, and a growing number of newcomers, with African Americans, whites, and an increasing flow of Latino and Asian residents. What weaves us into one community? Our magnet schools. Our schools are our town, but it wasn't always this way.
One of my teachers, his mother-in-law, grew up in Montclair, and she came to see me one day, and she said, I never thought I'd live to see the day that there would be a Black principal at Northeast School, because we weren't even allowed on this side of town.
My family has been in Montclair for 5 generations. I attended Glenfield School. I lived on Elmwood Avenue, which was right around the corner. I couldn't go to Wellmont Theater. We had to sit upstairs if we went to Wellmont Theater, so we just didn't go very often.
I guess in the 50s, there were still some Italian-American families that were here in the south end of town, which is where I grew up. We had a heavy African-American population here in this area, which was once mostly Italian. So as the Italians were able to move out, they moved out to other areas or out of Montclair, and then this area became predominantly African-American.
Upper Montclair, where I grew up, was not as diverse. I was definitely in a minority. There were very few Jews in Upper Montclair. The only Italian I knew owned the Valvano's drugstore where Penn Federal is. And the only African Americans were household help. Watchung Avenue was the realtors' dividing line. We would go riding around and see for sale houses. Never would a realtor actually take us to see one. So we settled on a house in South End.
Realtors, when we were buying our house, kept on telling us, oh, you don't want to live in that section of town. You want to live in the northeast section of town. And our comment was, why? Well, don't you want to be around the type of people that you are? And we went, no. I said, we want to live in a community that is well-rounded.
Montclair has an interesting shape. It's about, from east to west, it's just a mile wide. But from north to south, it's 6 miles. So it's like a rectangle. And if you slice the rectangle into sections, the south end would be 90% Black. The north end would be probably more than 90% white. And the center was where the most integrated residential areas were.
At Nishawane for kindergarten, if I have to remember back, all my friends were Black. Yeah, because we went to the pool together, we went to school together.
I grew up on the opposite side of town of Sean, up near Mountainside Park. So, you know, I went to my neighborhood school, which was Bradford at the time.
Kindergarten through second grade, I was at Glenfield, and it was mostly Black, and the kids that were there that weren't were Italians that were from the Pine Street area that attended because they lived in the fourth ward across town.
The circumstances, as I understand them, is that there were a group of parents back in the 60s who felt that the schools were not only perhaps as integrated as they should be, but also that there was an inequity in the materials and services provided to African-American students versus white students.
From Nishawane, where we had, nurturing teachers that had very, very high expectations of all of us, those teachers were predominantly African-American, teaching African-American students. And they were very strict on us, and they weren't quote unquote, dummying down. They would set very high standards, and then they would do everything that they had to do to teach us to meet those standards. So that part was wonderful. The part that wasn't so wonderful was that we were receiving, books that were outdated, that the physical structure of the building was not comparable to that on other ends, and that, there were some things that we were missing out on.
The resources in the schools that were predominantly Black were very minimal compared to the other schools in town. The Glenfield School was in a state of disrepair. The parents and the students were complaining about the lack of materials.
A group of parents came together, and in 1966, they filed a lawsuit, which became rather famous in the context of history, New Jersey, Rice versus the Montclair Board of Education. That led to a commissioner's decision in November of 1967 that spoke to the need to have the district actually mandate some kind of integration in its schools.
Everyone was concerned because we were under court mandate to get it settled.
There were a number of plans that were presented, the red plan and the blue plan and the green plan and this plan, and it was either voted down by the board members or by the community in some cases. The Rand School was in a Black neighborhood, and the Watchung School was mixed but predominantly white. So they decided to put the 5th and 6th grades at Rand, and then the little kids would come to Watchung. Well, think about that. There were kids who lived south of Chestnut Street who had to kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, 4th grade, to walk to Watchung, go home for lunch, walk back to Watchung after an hour and 20 minutes on rainy days or cold days. And it was insane.
We had begun by forced busing. We said, okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna force kids to go ride buses, and nobody was very happy with that because they didn't begin by improving the schools. They began by saying that with the premise that, gee, everything is equal in town, and we're gonna just move the people to make the mix come out right. And of course, that wasn't the way it was, because the people who were in the south end of town had bought legal suit because the schools in the south end of town weren't very good. And then people in the north end of town didn't really at that time see going to school with Black students as that desirable. So they were not happy to ride buses.
1972 was the first year of involuntary busing. And it was a very interesting time because we were told by the principal that we should be prepared to have parents protesting, coming to the school, possibly picketing. So it was kind of overwhelming for a first year teacher.
Mother was on the Board of Ed at the time when they were doing the token busing. She was at Board of Ed meetings until 1 o'clock every night of the week. The president of the Board of Ed, Cliff Lindholm, would not let her go home by herself. They both lived uptown, and he escorted her home because it was a very tense time.
They had tried something which was 1 grade out of every elementary school, which said that nobody's gonna have to ride the buses all through their elementary grades. But what we'll do is we'll take the 3rd grade out of Glenfield, we'll take the 4th grade maybe out of Northeast. And then for 1 year, your child will ride the school bus.
Bus up to Edgemont. That's the only year I ever did busing. And some of my friends had bused to Northeast, some had bused to Watchung. So we'd separated.
Well, that didn't work out so well because the year that their child was supposed to ride the bus, they took their kids out of school, put them in private school, brought them back when it was time to
go back to the regular
to go back to
school.
the regular school. They actually, during the period of time when we went through these various plans and strategies, there was something like 1,500 students who left the public school, and it was really not a happy place.
Things were in a turmoil then.
The attendance at the board meetings was quite spectacular. We were
Yes.
there all the time. I remember saying, well, we ought to do another study, and everyone would groan. And we have to do this. We have to stop talking about it and we have to do it. And as a matter of fact, we went to Trenton. Do you remember?
Yes, we did.
There was an office down there called the Office of Equal Educational Opportunity, and there was a woman by the name of Nida Thomas. Nida Thomas was amazed when we walked in because we sat down and said, all right, fun's fun, but we're not doing the job. Now, what can you do to help us? And to have a group of Black and white parents along with an administrator come down. And the board members in Montclair were furious with us. We didn't get permission. We just did it without telling anybody.
And that's when the Mother's Plan came about, and we had a school, a math school, a science school, a literature school, and performing arts school. Finally, when we got a fairly good idea of how to present it and what it looked like, we went up to see the superintendent, and he liked it.
In 1976, 2 years after I got here, the town election in May had been basically a referendum on the schools. And so they put in a new mayor, Grant Gilley came in, and he was very much a healer in terms of his perspective. And he put together a board that I was placed on as a board member. The exciting thing about all that was that the commitment to listen and to respond. And I think that was what made Montclair somewhat unique. We had a very good ear to what the community was asking for, and we had a superintendent, Walter Marks, who was a creative person in terms of a curriculum response.
Remember living room dialogues?
Yes.
We would have within each school district 2 or 3 people who offered their homes in the neighborhood. and 3 or 4 or 5 people would come, and we would just discuss the issue of schools and race and what was happening and how to go about it. And there was a groundswell, and it built from small groups.
Parents were actively involved. Walter Marks made sure that parents sat on our committees, that parents had a chance to go and visit other sites, that parents had a voice in determining what we were going to do. And I think that was a key, because I think that's what helped me as a principal, because I had the support of the parents.
Because it was the north end, south end that had the problems, and the schools in the middle of town were already integrated satisfactorily in terms of state definition, we focused on putting programs in the north and south end of town. There was a considerable interest in that kind of arts curriculum and the kind of thing that lends itself to gifted and talented. We found that there was a strong commitment in the community to things that were called the back to basics, the fundamental school. And since the minority community was more in favor of the back to the basic school, we put that in the white neighborhood, in the north end of town, Bradford School. And we took the artsy magnet and put it in the south end of town. And that made people want to ride the buses in order to get there.
It was really genius to be able to almost survey parents and figure out what kind of school would you like for your child? And we were really able to take that information and then craft Bradford School, craft Nishawayne and Hillside.
Busing had a bad reputation everywhere because they didn't like what was at the end of the bus ride. And the whole thing that made our busing work is that we changed at the end of the bus ride to itself being a victory. And then we found that we had more people wanting to ride buses than had ever been forced to.
When you develop a program that is a draw, and it's going to pull people to that program, even if you live in another part of town.
I happened to have been at Hillside the year it opened as the Gifted and Talented Magnet. And the superintendent handpicked the staff for that school because, again, what's going to draw parents away from the comfort of their neighborhood school?
At that time, they took a lot of the Mount Hebron teachers and moved them to Glenfield to draw more of the Upper Montclair population to down towards the 4th Ward, Glenfield. And my parents chose that because I had a lot of my siblings, 2 of my siblings go to Mount Hebron, and she wanted me to have the same teachers that they did. So it did get me to go across town.
It was an amazing thing because we were really designing a school. Teachers were asked to think of their wildest dream and let's see if we can make it happen. We had so much federal funding at that time to desegregate the schools. So that's why that curriculum at Glenfield and Nishawayne and Hillside is so exciting because there were funds available, staff was available. I think there were 7 teachers who were unassigned who were just to write curriculum for those schools during that period.
Foreign language, we had Chinese, French, Russian, and Spanish. Future studies, Luna City, Moon Dunes. We brought in dancers from Broadway. We had violinists from the New York Philharmonic. My daughter got to dance with a woman who was dancing in the Wiz on Broadway at the same time that she was teaching my daughter. First board meeting in September, when we had the schools open, the auditorium was full. And of course, when the board sits at the table and looks at a standing room only house, we know we got trouble. What they were concerned about is that we didn't have enough buses. There were 2 buses were too crowded. It really proved that what's at the end of the bus ride is what counts. Improved the schools and busing ceased to be an issue. I think the academic success, that's what you are as a school district in the business to teach kids well. And I feel that what we did was to improve the schools and get kids connected to their learning styles in a much more effective way than the old program had done, because now we had choices. And a child who learned best in a structured environment could choose a school for that environment. A child who lended themselves either to the arts or whatever could find their wings in that environment. And many times, if they got their wings in that environment where they were really good, it's backed up into the other areas where they gave them the confidence to get strong in areas which have been weaknesses. So I think that that is the success, that we have had sound academic results.
I remember my youngest one had a friend to spend the night, and the mom told me that her little girl came home after a sleepover, and she said to her, we white people, they have sheets on their beds just like we do. It was an education for these kids. I don't care where they lived in town.
I saw her, and I didn't, this is fourth grade. I mean, and obviously as part of the integration system or the magnet system that brought us together.
We met in fourth grade. We had a lot of the same friends. We grew up together.
The greatest thing is that because we went through the school system, because we were a part of Montclair, that it really wasn't an issue for us. I mean, I'm really honest about this because, and I think the great thing about Montclair is that I wasn't a black kid who went to an all-white school. So I can be black. I can be myself here in Montclair. I can be part of my community. She can be who she is. So I didn't have to act like her, and she didn't have to act like me to be with each other. We came together as two people.
Nothing will make me bat an eye on who the person is, what they look like in any way, because I feel like I've just been around that my entire life. That is so much more beneficial than probably people realize.
You don't really get the benefit of Montclair until you leave. The social skills that you allow, being able to get along with people from all walks of life, it's amazing how much it's helped me in my professional career, because you have a sense of confidence and inner confidence that, it's nothing new to you.
I mean, how do you go backwards? I mean, I don't know whether the neighborhoods would be integrated enough to keep the integration. And I think that's important.
Still, Fourth Ward is predominantly African American. Still, Upper Montclair is predominantly white.
Our school system is what brings everybody together in this town. And not only the children, but then it starts to bring the parents together.
I don't see neighborhood schools as being a means of offering the same opportunities, because I think that you're seeing more affluence come into the town.
I think the greatest challenge is not maybe keeping it diverse, because I think we've been able to do that well, but keeping it socioeconomically diverse.
I think the biggest challenge to me is grappling with the achievement gap, because that one, there's a numerical value to it, but also there's a stigma.
Some of the system's greatest challenges are probably appeasing as many people as possible and maintaining or balancing the schools as equally as possible. If you have one school that has a weakness somewhere, that impacts every other school. So the school system as a whole has to work together.
I think there are some people who get to Montclair and they think they understood what diversity meant, but they really didn't understand the intricacies of diversity and what it translates into on a day-to-day basis. And it does mean that children and families with all different experiences and all different resources are right there with their child in class.
People like people who are like them. And so while our children may be kind of learning about how the differences aren't as different as they think, I'm not sure that we as adults are getting there. And kids aren't stupid either. Kids see, oh yeah, we want to talk about diversity, but who comes to dinner at your house?
One of the things though that I've put in place for our daughter, her friends, we make sure consciously and unconsciously that they are from all races and that she experiences all these things, because we're not wealthy. By no means are we wealthy, but that doesn't have anything to do with who she's around. So that's work. That is absolutely work. It's up to us. Sit next to that person who you don't usually sit next to and talk to them. So that's the work. It's work and it continues. It started way back when and it continues to today. Montclair isn't made for you. You make Montclair what it is for you.
I've been walking in the same way as I do, missing out the cracks in the pavement and tutting my heel and strutting my feet. Is there anything I can do for you, dear? Is there anyone I could call? No one, thank you, please, madame. I ain't lost, just wondering. Round my hometown, memories of phrase. Round my
Angelica?
Thank you, Maciel. But now with the screening, what we'd like to do is open up to discussion, chat. I mean, we can be an informal group if you'd like to turn on your audio and tune in, or if you prefer to put any questions or thoughts in the chat, we'd like to make it an open discussion.
Maciel, I remember when you did this, we were both on the PTA council. And can you explain what prompted it, the kind of discussions that prompted it at those PTA council meetings when you decided to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess it was maybe like 2008 and, the financial crisis and there was budget cuts and, we were, and the PTA council, for those of you who don't know, it's a group of all the PTA presidents from the school district. And some of the PTA leaders were talking about and asking, an easy couple $1 million that we could put back into the budget would be if we just ended busing. Why do we have this magnet school system? It's nice, it's got great bells and whistles, but we could just have our neighborhood schools and save, a lot of money. And there was a few of us who were like, but we're still under court order. And then we realized that there were leaders. These are, parent leaders with voice, with access to influence change in the district that didn't understand, didn't even know that about the magnet school system and the history of the magnet schools. And so when that became evident, we realized that we have to all at least have this grounding in our history before we're going to make change. We have to know where we came from, right? And why this system is so significant and why it's so important. And so we thought about putting together like a brochure, just to kind of give some information to folks. So we had started kind of throwing around those ideas. And I remember talking to a few people just to really educate myself because I was relatively new to the district and actually not that new, been here a long time. But in Montclair, when you live with legends that have been here and then done this work, I feel like I'm always going to feel like I'm I'm not Montclair native born. So I feel like that's a very special community, but, and I've always been in awe of this community and folks who have built things like the magnet system. But I remember doing my own research just to kind of get a little more educated and went to the library and started reading through the newspaper articles and then said, you know what, I'd love to just talk to a few of these people and started having conversations and the stories were so rich that, and I read, the book that Bernadette Nunn and the folks over at Renaissance had put together and I was just so impressed with the story that I was like, this would not be done justice in a brochure, in a trifold. So that's where we started kind of thinking about how we would put it together. And it's definitely a home brew. I'm super embarrassed to watch some parts. I'm like, ooh, the audio is not great. I was not a filmmaker. I shot it on my little handy cam when I had my kids in between like school pickups and soccer practices and interviews. But I had a friend of mine had a childcare provider who was had just graduated from film school. And so my friend said, you know, she might be interested in helping you edit the piece. And I said, sure. So we met, and me and this 20-something-year-old spent a lot of time together editing. She did the editing. I did the filming and the interviewing, and I watch it now. I'm like, oh my goodness, I definitely could not have pulled that off without Lorna. So, but that was it. Is really trying to, you know, build an awareness amongst the most immediate audience, which was really our PTA leaders, but really realized that it was something that we all, you know, could use a refresher on.
Thank you, Maciel. Just a note from Erica Wright, who says that they just cannot turn on camera audio, just to say thank you. And they are looking forward to discussing this with their family who's native to Montclair for the last 4 to 5 generations for 120 plus years. So they're going to have some discussions with their 86-year-old grandmother from Pine this weekend. So just a lot of appreciation, thoughts, and look forward to more programs and discussions as this. So thank you, Erica and Curtis.
Go ahead, Peg, just unmute yourself and speak up.
Yes.
Hi, this is fantastic. Thank you. I had the great honor of serving with Carol Willis on the planning board, and I believe that Carol is still on the board. It's been at least 8 years, if not 12, and she continues this work in the opportunities that we still have, especially in terms of creating affordable housing in Montclair. So thank you. This is fantastic. The other place that I would love to have this conversation and this video shown, my church, such as we call it, is the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Montclair. Our Undoing Racism Committee has been focusing on a number of issues, but I've been getting a lot of questions about displacement. And I know that was touched on a little bit in terms of the cost of living in Montclair. To the extent that I could refer you and this film to this group at the UU, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely, Peg. That would be, and I would be thrilled to talk to anyone from the UU about having a conversation. And I think that is one of our biggest challenges right now in Montclair. It has been for a while, but it's really reaching a peak in that we're losing families who can't afford to live here anymore. And often those are our families of color. And that's a pretty tragic loss for our community. And affordable housing is something that we absolutely need to face head on, and with the same kind of courage that I think the families who created the magnet school system face. Right?
Yeah.
When Gene Kidd says, "No more talk, we've got to do this," you know. And it's also so hard to watch this now because some of those legends have passed. And I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to meet with them because they are truly inspiring humans.
I see Jan, you putting up a hand?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to say that this is a fabulous film, and it takes it beyond what the other earlier films were and the earlier books. When I moved here in 1986 and started teaching in Montclair in 1987, first I was at Mount Hebron teaching language arts, and then I went to Edgemont, which was the fine arts magnet, not the performing arts magnet, but the fine arts magnet. And we had Lincoln Center come in and so forth. We were there for a while, and then I was called in by Mary Lee Fitzgerald and said, "We want you to start a new magnet school." So I started the last magnet school that was started in Montclair as something different, and it was called MIT, Magnet for Information Technology, because the committee who'd sort of done all the research looked at the fact that we needed to step into technology. And so it was a program for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, started almost the same time as the RAND program for the younger grades, but they didn't focus on technology, and we were multi-age. But when we formed those first 3 classes, so there were 25 in each grade level, we had an absolute even split, 50-50 of white and minority students. And I was told before I even went there and did that, that anything we put up on the bulletin board, whether it was student writing, pictures that they drew or whatever, anything, it was to be absolutely put up alternating black, white, girl, boy, whatever. So there was it was probably the last time we were able to design it with an absolute even split. And that program, I did a lot of going out into the community, talking to all kinds of people, because who wanted to put their kid in a multi-age setting? At that time, it was middle school. Would the kids mix? How would they possibly learn? Whatever. And then it grew so fast that we moved to Bradford, and we changed the name to the Bradford Magnet for Communication Arts and Sciences. And then it ultimately became the University Magnet. But it was the blend of that we stuck to for what we needed to do for equity and diversity. That was absolutely fascinating. I had come from Iowa, which didn't have a very high diverse relationship, other than you had to learn how to pronounce Czech names, to Montclair. And I absolutely embraced the diversity and the culture and the ability to teach all kinds of people, children and parents, in that time period. So it was a wonderful experience, but the way it was handled, I can't even think of her name. There was a saint down in central office who did all the placing of children so that we came out with an even blend. She was amazing. And then also, Jeanette Williams, are you still on here? There was Shirley Williams and Marilyn Shapiro's mother, and those people who were all with us in the same period of time. They were people who actually took whole classes of children and moved them. So Shirley Williams took a whole class of kindergarten children from Nishwain or Glenfield, I sort of forget, and went to Bradford with that. And then she was there during the rest of the time. And they took a class from Grove Street School and moved it to Northeast. And it was Marilyn Shapiro's mother who taught that class. And you just know, you could identify with the people who were doing that. Betty Veal was in the film. I hadn't thought about her for a long time. I remember when I had been teaching just for a few weeks in 3rd grade, which was a huge shock from teaching high school English to teaching 3rd grade, all levels, everything. Sat in the back of the classroom and she said, "Well, I don't see that you're teaching very much social studies." And I said, "Well, nobody has given me any material." And she sent me the packet that they had developed at the time of the magnet schools, the entire packet with the slides and the pictures and the history. And I still have parts of that because I think it's so important, everything that was done in Montclair to strive for equity and diversity in our school system. And the magnet school system is what did it.
Thank you, Jan.
Yeah.
Elaine, you were here. What was your experience during the time? What were parents? Were your children during the transition to the magnet school system?
No, my kids grew up a little later.
Yeah.
But I started in Nishwain, and then my family moved to the Watchung district, and most of it was because there were maybe 2 white kids in the class, and we were minorities, and so they moved to Upper Montclair, not only for that reason, but my father needed transportation with the train and so forth. But it was definitely get out of the South End and move to Upper Montclair, where you belong. And we did that in 1951. But my kids grew up in the total magnet system.
We did also have a question come in the chat, Maciel. So were there other towns which had magnet schools before Montclair? And if so, did we learn from them? How many of their school districts now use the magnet school system?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My understanding, and from conversations with some of the folks in the film and Dr. Frank Alvarez, and is that Montclair was it's like in the single digits in terms of the number of schools that have used the magnet system this way to desegregate schools, right? So there's plenty of magnet school systems where you have to test in, and they're kind of you have which is I think the more common model for the term magnet system. And in our case was really, as as you hear in the film, is really what is so special was the time and thought and conversation that was put into the design, and really listening to parents and what they needed and what they wanted, to use that to build this framework that was going to draw folks by their choice and by their preferences, right? Not by kind of testing into certain things, but even the start times. They looked at Nishwain, because they built Nishwain as the gifted and talented, and brought in kind of the Broadway dancers and the artists, and they built out the dance rooms, and they had all that funding to be able to make that really exciting experience. They also knew that many of the white students' parents, their mothers, were at home and wanted, they could, if they were going to stagger busing, they made that start time later, because they knew that the stay-at-home moms could kind of use that time to they weren't having to get their kids on the bus and out to work. So the earlier start times were the schools on the the Bradfords and the Northeast, because they were trying to draw families of color to the North Side. So they even looked at things like start times to really try to make sure that they were weaving together a system that was going to pull and draw how they wanted to pull and draw, right? Which is kind of fascinating. So in short answer, I don't think there were many districts who have designed their systems like this. And interestingly enough, we've kind of come not full circle, because you never finish this work. You're constantly always thinking about issues of equity and race. Like, that's lifelong work, right, for individuals as well as communities. But we've become more, we've developed a relationship with folks in Oak Park, River Forest, which is a suburb of Chicago, and very similar to Montclair in terms of kind of being a community that really is focused on being an integrated community, and has made that their lifelong work as well. And so we learned of a documentary, it's called America to Me, that follows high school students through their high school experience, really as a way of looking at, this is an intentional community that was really looking at integration. And where are we now, kind of in 2020, which when the docuseries was made, where are we now in terms of the experience of our Black students in a school system, right? And where are the opportunities for growth? And we've used that documentary actually to fuel a community dialogue program that MFE started in 2019 that's now called the Learning Circles on Race, building off of what these folks did, years ago, the living room dialogues. We've had, conversations on race in Montclair. So the Learning Circles on Race are really a way for us to continue to do the work. As we hear from Charmaine, the woman who spoke at the very end, and when she says, Montclair isn't made for you, you make Montclair, and you have to work to keep this community what we want it to be. So we've taken that charge and created a kind of a curriculum for us to continue to think about what it looks like and what it requires to keep this, high quality integrated public school system thriving. So the film was instructive for us too, as an organization, to kind of think about, well, what is the work that we need to be doing?
We were told when I first came here that we were the first school on the East Coast to do neighborhood integration, not just by subject area or topic, to really use the busing to do that totally in all the elementary schools and bringing it up the line. Whereas others had picked out and you could test or whatever to go in. We were the first one that just took away neighborhood schools and redesigned it.
Right. Jeanette Williams, I think you were trying to say something as well, if you wanted to share.
Sure. I was just going to add that you can see that there was a phenomenal amount of planning that went into this venture. All the details were truly looked at. And thinking about the pandemic and what has happened to children in the past 2 years, it may be helpful for us to take a look at what we know had worked previously, the intention behind it, and bring that forth again, just because this was a lot of out of the box thinking and it worked.
I so appreciate that comment. And I think, watching it back and you think about exactly, Jeanette, what you're saying is like, this was an entire community of people who really started to think outside of the box, right? And they tried, there was the grade plan, I think is, Jean, talks about it. Like there were so many fits and starts, right? But that's also like representative of a community that is worth, really willing to think and be creative and try things out and test things out. And you're absolutely right, Jeanette, that the pandemic has really highlighted that we need to continue to be that creative community to face the challenges that we're facing now, right? And to really get that broad swell of support from our entire community to support these schools because they still need us.
And I hope our new residents are looking at this documentary because again, it's lessons to be learned.
Now, my dream of dreams, Jeanette, is to do this with realtors and to invite, as they're working with new families coming in, to figure out how we can have these kind of conversations with folks as they come into the town. And, not in a judgmental way, but just to like, hey, this is our town history. And we invite you to kind of think through some of this with us.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recently we have been working with some oral histories that we did a few years ago. And I reviewed sort of 6 or 7 or 8 of them. And many of the people who sat with us for oral histories mentioned what a watershed moment it was in Montclair when the magnet schools were introduced. And these were people like Roger Terry, former, police, was he the chief or the deputy chief, and his sister. And they were, weren't even in the schools at that time, but just as residents who'd been here before and after. It came up. That was one of the things that I was so impressed with in reviewing a bunch of oral histories at once, was how often the magnet school system came up. For people who have lived in this town for a very long time. And, even if it didn't benefit them, they recognize, what it did for our town.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to share too, we had historic house tours the other weekend, Maciel, and one of the women in the video actually was recalling being involved with the magnet school system planning and remembering what the challenges and strides were to get that system initiated initially because of resistance from families. But she was sharing her thoughts and recollections, and I wanted to share that with you as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the title really it represents what our schools really mean to this town, even if you don't have kids in the schools, right? Like they are the core, they're the fabric, because when you think about it too, right? Schools are so fundamental and they resonate with all of us, right? Because yes, they're teaching academics. Yes, we're preparing kids to be successful. But at the end of the day, we're socializing kids, right? We're socializing the next generation. We want them to kind of be together, learn from each other. that's the ultimate celebration of our humanity as a community is. And I think that, our schools in particular, I really think, do a good job, and we want to support them to continue to do that work, which is so vital. I mean, I think, talking to the Jennings it always makes me cheer up a little bit, the thought of them as 4th graders, meeting each other and because it's, that story is repeated over and over again. There are many Jennings in this magnet history story, which is a really amazing, beautiful thing. And maybe they don't all get married, but the friendships that have been formed, and that's the stuff that really matters.
I also remember, Maciel, around the same time, during those conversations when you were thinking of doing the documentary, that was it the PTA Council that sponsored a project from, I believe it was Kent State University, that to determine if we went back to neighborhood schools, would they be segregated or not? So we sort of said, okay, let's think about it. Can we go back to neighborhood schools and achieve the type of segregation and balance that we want? And what they found was, resoundingly no. we would still have very imbalanced schools if we would return to neighborhood schools.
Right, for sure. No, it was, and I think we did the PTA Council actually sponsored screenings at all of the schools. I think shortly after we launched it, and we did a screening at the high school, which was a very interesting screening. So they decided to screen the film with all 2,000 students at Montclair High School during different periods. But that actually, I have to say, that was one of the, it was these, you know, it was a challenging conversation. There were certainly students that had very different, you know, it resonated for them in different ways. And they were, you know, many were very critical of the schools as they currently operate in terms of, you know, we could be doing more to support, you know, both integration and, you know, academically as well as socially. So I've always like listened to those folks and those student voices and thought of that for me as like, they're so right. We have so much more work to do. So that's, I think the other piece is like, you know, we owe it to our students to keep working.
But I think also we need to congratulate people like the Montclair History Center and things like that, because I did Tuesday, I was doing the open hearth with Montclair students and kids from Bullock, and they came in perfectly behaved, all girls and boys and all races mixed together, and they're getting it in a different way. And I think we need to include funding from the school system so that you can have more people coming, more children coming at different ages, because you can only do so much in one morning, right, Angelica? With one morning of a third grade visit. Whereas if we did it more, it's an automatic way of teaching about the diversity and the culture of Montclair. And we have a lot of that in place at the History Center.
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, and I think we get all the third grade students that come to Montclair and us, which is really focused on early life, and to see what students' thoughts and reactions would be at a higher age level, coming back to talk about Montclair's growth and diversity 20th century onwards would be, I'm sure, really powerful for the students.
You know, I've said for a long time, we need to have something at fourth or fifth grade and something at eighth grade, and then something in high school where they really come and benefit, not just from the Crane House, but all the History Center has to offer, because we've updated ourselves too, and there's always more to do, and we need to go backwards and do Indigenous people and all sorts of diversity in Montclair. Yep.
Thank you, Jan.
Hi, it's Peg again. I just sorry to jump in one more time, but on this very topic, some of you may know about the efforts underway to preserve the Howe House. And again, the UU is pretty involved in that. I can upload some information on the chat if you want to know more, but on that very discussion about our history and our knowledge, this is a home owned by a formerly enslaved person, a man, and it's an essential part of our history. So whatever can be done to support that effort, I'll just load something into the chat. Thanks.
Thank you, Peg. Yes, please post the Friends of the Houses group information. That would be very helpful for people interested to learn more and get involved. But Marcel, thank you so much for your time and energy, and for the work that, and as you said, the work that also still has yet to be done. You know, there's more to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, if anybody knows others who you think would be very interested in this, please, you know, share the link to from our website, or let them know, you know, shoot them an email or a text or a call today to attend at 7.